Welcome to the Sky Commander Flight Brief. It's your mission-ready podcast for drone pilot training and aerial insights across Canada.
From Transport Canada rules to real-world drone ops, we break it down, take you higher, and help you earn your wings. Because here at skycommander.ca, we don't just fly.
It hints there's more to it. It's a masterclass, a deeper level, maybe a philosophy or a community focus, perhaps.
It's definitely intriguing, sets them apart from just, a basic tips show. Skycommander.ca is the obvious next step. Precisely. If you're thinking about flying a drone in Canada, boom, this content is aimed right at you.
Powered by skycommander.ca.
The elite podcast for Canada's drone pilot. Okay, let's get started. Have you ever looked up, at the cityscape, seen a drone zipping around, maybe capturing one of those breathtaking cinematic shots over a busy harbor or even inspecting a towering skyscraper? And have you wondered, how exactly do they do that?
It's a great question because what looks pretty smooth and effortless from the ground is often, the result of incredibly meticulous planning. Drones are, rapidly becoming just an integral part of our urban landscape.
They really are.
But behind every single smooth takeoff and, perfect landing in these dense, complex city environments, there's this whole labyrinth of evolving regulations, unique challenges, and absolutely critical safety measures.
And that is exactly what we're diving into today. Our mission is pretty clear. We're embarking on a deep dive into this fascinating world of urban drone operations, specifically zeroing in on those really crucial phases: safe launch and safe retrieve.
Yeah, getting it up and getting back down safely in the middle of everything.
Precisely. We're going to try and unravel the complex history of these rules, break down the key regulations you absolutely need to master, explore some real-world scenarios that, challenge even the most seasoned pilots, and maybe cast an eye towards what the future holds for drones in our cities.
Sounds good.
Our goal for you, our listener, is really to shortcut your way to being truly well-informed, armed with some surprising facts maybe, and the essential insights needed to really grasp the complexities of flying drones safely and compliantly in built-up areas. So let's unpack this.
Yeah, let's do it. It's fascinating because these rules, the sort of pillars of urban drone safety, they didn't just appear fully formed on some government document one day. They've actually gone through a pretty dramatic evolution.
Right.
Moving from what, many would describe as the Wild West era to the much more codified and controlled environment we navigate today.
Wild West really paints a picture, doesn't it? Let's cast our minds back to that era, specifically pre-June 1st, 2019. Before that date, the Canadian Aviation Regulations CARS Part 9, which is the big set of rules we largely operate under now, it didn't even exist for drones. So how on earth were people flying drones in cities back then?
That's a good question. It was a completely different ballgame. Operations in built-up areas relied very heavily on what were called interim orders and, maybe more importantly, special flight operations certificates. We usually just call them SFOCs.
SFOCs are right.
And for almost every drone over 35 kilograms, and actually eventually even for lighter ones, an SFOC was just a non-negotiable requirement. Imagine, just for a moment, the sheer administrative burden involved in that.
Oh, I can only imagine. What did that actually mean for, say, a drone pilot or maybe a company wanting to fly in downtown Toronto or Vancouver?
It meant a case-by-case review by Transport Canada. For nearly every single drone operation planned in a city, there was no standardized checklist like we have now, nothing you could just tick off. And this wasn't just, a minor inconvenience. It created immense uncertainty. It could drag out project timelines for weeks, sometimes months. And this custom approach led to SFOC conditions that, looking back, were really the foundational precursors to our current rules.
Like what sort of conditions?
Things like you must launch from a secured area or no overflight of public roads allowed, and the almost universal requirement back then for having a visual observer, a VO, in basically any urban setting.
Okay.
So while it might have seemed a bit chaotic, the concept of urban launch and retrieve rules was actually being hammered out, one SFOC at a time, long before it was formally written into law.
And Transport Canada presumably had some very significant concerns driving this. And I imagine for very good reasons.
Oh, absolutely. Valid reasons. When you think back to those early drones, like the first DJI Phantoms or even some of the more experimental home-built units, frankly, they had significantly higher failure rates compared to today's highly engineered systems.
Right. Much less reliable.
Exactly. And urban areas, just by their nature, offered minimal safe crash options. You've got buildings, cars, and the most unpredictable element of all, people. Crowds were, and honestly, to some extent still are, incredibly unpredictable. They create constant proximity violation risks. You could have a perfect flight plan, everything mapped out, but one curious person stepping into your designated safety zone could create an instant hazard. And then there's the airspace itself. Downtown areas often sit directly under active approach and departure paths for manned aircraft, or they're uncomfortably close to heliports, leading to very real airspace congestion issues.
So TC was worried about, mid-air collisions, drones falling?
Essentially, yeah. Transport Canada was asking, what if one of these early drones, with its higher failure rate, loses control over a crowded street? Or what if it interferes with an emergency helicopter trying to land at a hospital? That anxiety, that potential for disaster, really drove much of the early, very strict SFOC requirements.
That truly paints a vivid picture of the anxieties back then. And to illustrate just how challenging those early days were, there's this fantastic anecdote I came across. Picture this. Canada's first known urban drone flight for media happened way back in 2012 in Vancouver.
Okay, 2012.
Yeah, early days. It was for a snowboard shop commercial, which sounds pretty straightforward, right? But here's where it gets really interesting. It was technically illegal at the time without approval, needing an SFOC that took, get this, a painstaking 6 weeks to get approved.
6 weeks.
6 weeks. Just to get permission for one, probably quite short, flight.
And I think I knew this story. Wasn't there something unusual about the launch site?
Exactly. Here's the kicker. To avoid navigating downtown Vancouver bylaws and probably some of those tricky urban hazards we just talked about, the launch pad itself wasn't a street corner or a park. It was a barge anchored out in Cole Harbor.
They launched from a barge?
Yeah.
Seriously?
Seriously. They literally had to bring their launch site to the water to make the whole thing happen legally and safely. That one single event, needing that much lead time, that much creative problem solving, it just underscores the almost improvisational, high-hurdle nature of urban drone ops in those nascent days.
That's incredible. A barge launch pad. It really highlights the challenges.
It's an incredible story, and it perfectly sets the stage for the massive shift that came in 2019. So let's fast forward to June 1st of that year. We enter the era of, let's call it, codified control with the introduction of CARS Part 9. When these regulations came into force, the main goal was pretty revolutionary, wasn't it?
Oh, hugely. The primary aim was to replace the vast majority of those time-consuming case-by-case SFOC applications with standardized, scalable rules, particularly for what we call small, remotely piloted aircraft systems, or RPAS, basically drones under 25 kilograms.
And this standardization, it formalized those critical aspects of urban launch and retrieve, maybe not always with a specific rule saying urban launch, but by embedding the principles into very specific CAR sections that apply everywhere, right?
Precisely. Take a CAR 901.27, for example. That's the one dealing with the site survey. It explicitly requires pilots' mandates really to assess obstacles, proximity to persons, approach and departure routes, and environmental conditions before every single flight. This wasn't just a good idea anymore. It was now a legal obligation.
That's such a fundamental shift. And then you have SAR 901.33, which is about ensuring a suitable site. It mandates ensuring no likelihood of collision at your chosen launch and recovery site. That sounds broad, but it carries immense weight in practice.
It absolutely does. And then SAR 901.26 defined the minimum separation rules from people, making that crucial distinction between basic and advanced operations, which is vital for anyone operating in a city.
Right. The 30-meter rule for basic versus potentially closer for advanced under specific conditions.
Exactly. And finally, CRR 901.23, which covers the review of procedures. This essentially put the onus squarely on pilots to have thoroughly thought through both their normal and their contingency launch and landing procedures before they even fire up the drone, thinking through what if.
And the regulatory framework didn't just stop with the cars themselves, did it? Transport Canada seemed to realize they needed more practical, maybe urban-specific guidance.
That's right. So they integrated more detailed practical guidance into documents like the Transport Canada Aeronautical Information Manual of the AM, and also into the TP 15263 knowledge requirements for pilot certification.
Good.
This is where TC started recommending really practical steps that quickly became best practices. Things like physically securing the launch pad with barriers, cones, tape, formally assigning and properly briefing a visual observer in urban environments, and even accounting for more nuanced factors like invisible wind shear between buildings, those subtle GNSS multipath issues from reflections, and the dynamic, unpredictable movement of crowds.
And it's worth pointing out, as you mentioned, that a reference like 6.2.4, which pilots might see in training materials isn't a Car R number itself, right?
Correct. That's an AIM training syllabus reference. It consolidates the requirements from several car sections into a single digestible topic like launch and recovery site selection, making it a much more practical guide for pilots out in the field trying to apply these rules.
It really sounds like a constant process of refinement, learning, and adaptation. And that evolution certainly didn't stop in 2019. From roughly 2020 up to 2025, and including some very recent shifts like SOR 2025-70, we've seen, what, 3 major forces continuing to influence how urban launch and retrieve operations are treated. What's the first big one?
Well, the first is simply the maturing of the drone technology itself. I mean, newer drones are just fundamentally more reliable than those early models.
Yeah, definitely.
They come equipped with features like much improved GNSS lock. They get a stable GPS signal faster and hold it better. They have increasingly sophisticated obstacle avoidance systems and more reliable, often customizable, return-to-home profiles.
So, safer tech overall.
Safer tech, yes. And while these advancements have certainly reduced some of the operational risks, a modern drone is much less likely to just randomly fall out of the sky these days. They haven't entirely solved the single most unpredictable factor in urban environments: human crowds. Technology still can't predict where someone might suddenly decide to walk.
That's a really key distinction. Technology helps, but doesn't solve the human element. What's the second major force?
The second, unfortunately, has been incident-driven emphasis. A handful of high-profile urban drone incidents, sad events like a drone losing control and ending up on a public road, or a documented near-miss with a manned helicopter flying over a city. These have profoundly reinforced the need for really robust hazard controls, particularly at those vulnerable launch and recovery points.
So specific incidents led to specific changes or emphasis.
Absolutely. These weren't just isolated events in the eyes of the regulator. They sent ripples through Transport Canada. They directly led to updated AIM guidance that put a much stronger emphasis on things like physical barriers around launch pads in urban areas, the absolute necessity of pre-flight communication with any nearby crowds or bystanders, and significantly stronger recommendations for using visual observers. VOs went from being just a good idea to becoming a near-mandatory safety net in complex urban settings.
And then the most recent shift, the SOR 2025-70 amendment, which just came into effect March 26, 2025. What were the big takeaways from that for these bread-and-butter urban VLOS operations?
Yeah, it's interesting. While the headlines for that amendment often focused on the really groundbreaking stuff like beyond visual line of sight, BVLOS, extended visual line of sight, EVLS, and operations in sheltered areas, it actually reinforced that the fundamental urban launch and retrieve rules for standard visual line of sight, VLOS operations, remain unchanged.
Okay, so the core rules like site survey and suitable sites still apply exactly the same.
Exactly. You still absolutely must meet CAR's 901.27 for your site survey and 901.33 for ensuring a suitable site. However, there was a significant new shift concerning advertised events. Those restrictions now apply even to micro drones under 250 grams in urban settings.
Whoa, okay, so flying a tiny drone at a public festival might suddenly need more paperwork.
Potentially, yes. It might now require an SICOC, which was almost never the case previously for microdrones. That's a huge change for those operators. And perhaps even more subtly impactful is that the practice of pad marking and crowd control using cones, tape, maybe crew, has pretty unequivocally transitioned from being just a best practice recommendation to what's now considered an expected norm, especially when it comes to enforcement. There were specific changes related to this effective February 20, 2025.
So what does that mean practically? If something goes wrong and you didn't mark your pad?
Well, Transport Canada is very likely to view that as a failure to meet your regulatory obligations under 901.33, the suitable site requirement. The expectation now is that you will take active steps to secure your immediate launch and landing area in an urban environment.
Okay, so we've charted this evolution from the Wild West through codification to these increasingly formalized and refined rules. But the burning question for you, our listener, has to be, how do you actually apply all this history and regulation when you're standing there, drone in hand, looking at a bustling city street or a complex rooftop? Where do you even begin?
And that brings us right to the cornerstone of safety, the site survey and ensuring a suitable site, covered explicitly by CAR's 901.27 and 901.33.
This is where it all starts, isn't it?
It's where it must start. Every single drone operation in Canada, but especially the unpredictable urban environment, must begin with a thorough site survey. And I emphasize thorough. This isn't just a suggestion. It's a fundamental regulatory requirement outlined in STRR 901.27.
And the goal isn't just a quick look around.
Not at all. The goal is to deeply, deeply understand every facet of your intended area of operation before you even think about powering up that drone. Think of it like becoming a meticulous urban detective, gathering all your intel, all your evidence, before the mission even starts.
An urban detective. I like that metaphor. And the Transport Canada Aeronautical Information Manual, the AM, it provides a really clear, plain language interpretation of what that CARS section demands, doesn't it? It outlines specific steps you need to follow.
It does. It's not just a quick glance. You need to clearly define your operations boundaries. How far out are you planning to fly? What's your maximum altitude? What's the maximum distance from your takeoff location? Then, crucially, you need to determine the airspace class. There's a Class C, Class E, uncontrolled, and what specific regulations apply there.
Okay, so boundaries and airspace first. What else?
Then you must map out your planned routes and altitudes precisely. Where exactly will the drone fly and how high? You need to assess the proximity of any manned aircraft or aerodromes. What's the nearest airport? Is there a busy heliport nearby? Are there likely to be manned aircraft potentially sharing your airspace at any point during your flight?
And identifying physical obstacles seems obvious but critical.
Absolutely paramount. Identify nearby obstacles, towers, bridges, trees, surrounding buildings, power lines, and especially active construction cranes, which can be dynamic, moving hazards you need to account for.
And this next point really highlights that human element we talked about. Security measures.
Yes. How will you effectively warn the public, if necessary, and safely cordon off your immediate area of operation? This is a key interpretation of how you maintain that minimum safe distance from people, ensuring bystanders don't wander into your zone.
Then weather, obviously.
Assessing the predominant weather conditions for the area. And not just, is it raining? Is the wind speed and direction within your drone's operational limits? And even checking things like the KP index, which indicates potential GPS interference from solar activity, something that could be more pronounced in certain urban environments.
And having a backup plan for landing.
Crucial. You need to identify a solid alternate landing site before you take off in case of an emergency or even just a precautionary landing. Because in a dense city, you often can't just drop it down in the nearest open field. There might not be one.
Right.
And something often overlooked, even by experienced pilots sometimes, you must understand aviation maps and symbols. Knowing what those symbols on your VNC charts or in the CFS actually mean is non-negotiable. This exhaustive list really reveals that mastering urban drone ops isn't just about flying the drone well. It's about becoming that meticulous urban detective before you even power up.
It really drives home that your most critical flight often happens on the ground, maybe even weeks before takeoff, just in the planning phase.
That's a great way to put it. And the surprising insight for many is just how much non-flying work goes into a safe urban flight.
And you're not expected to guess at all this information. There are many fantastic tools available, many of them free. Things like satellite imagery from Google Earth or Bing Maps can give you a great overhead view. Topographic maps, GeoGratis from National Resources Canada, and, of course, the official maps directly from NAV Canada.
Third-party apps can also be useful, absolutely. But a crucial point here, and this is on the pilot, you must ensure they are using official NAV Canada sourced data. Ultimately, it's your responsibility as the pilot in command to verify the accuracy of the information you're using.
Verification is key. And you should also use site coordinates whenever possible to pinpoint your exact location on a map. What if precise coordinates aren't immediately available?
Then you need to use clear landmarks or points of reference to orient yourself and define your operating area. This is a classic navigation technique called dead reckoning.
Okay, so let's make this really concrete. Let's walk through a live example to bring all this planning to life. Imagine a scenario. A member of the Jericho Sailing Club in Metro Vancouver wants some cool cinematic drone shots of them sailing out in the Burrard Inlet.
Okay, Vancouver waterfront, complex area.
Exactly. They've given you explicit permission to use the club's dock for takeoff and landing. The sailboat itself will stay within, say, 2 kilometers of the shore, and they want a mix of shots, low passes, high establishing shots, maybe some deer shots following the boat, all within about an hour, ideally right around sunset for the best light. You, the pilot, have a DJI Mavic 3, which weighs around 900 grams. So it's definitely not a micro drone, meaning it falls under stricter rules.
Okay, got scenario.
This is where navigating that complex urban airspace with tools like NAV drone, but absolutely critical. What's your very first step?
First step, before anything else, is to pull up map.navdrone.ca. If you leave the map defaulted to basic operations, which applies to any drone 250 grams or more, you'd immediately see that central Vancouver, including English Bay and the Jericho area, is entirely colored red, meaning it's controlled airspace. Your immediate realization should be, my 900-gram Mavic 3 cannot be flown here under basic rules, period. You'll absolutely need advanced certification and a specific authorization from NAV Canada for this flight. That's your first major planning hurdle identified right there.
Okay, so you switch the map view to advanced operations. What changes?
Switching to advanced changes the map visualization. Vancouver's airspace is uniquely complex. It features these intricate colored polygons and a grid system made up of 500-meter boxes. If you click on an area like English Bay itself, for instance, it's often designated ground-to-ground.
What does ground-to-ground mean?
It means there are no automatic flight approvals granted over the water there, even for advanced pilots. A human review by NAV Canada staff is required for any flight request in that zone. And that review typically takes anywhere from 36 to 72 hours, sometimes longer, to get an approval or denial.
So no last-minute flights over the water there. What about closer to shore?
Along the shoreline itself, depending on the exact location indicated by the grid box, you might be allowed up to, say, 200 feet automatically. So even within an advanced zone, there are these granular layers of restriction and altitude limits you need to be aware of.
Okay, so you've checked the map, you know you need advanced ops and likely manual approval. What's next? The NAV drone portal.
Exactly. Once you understand the basic airspace constraints, you move to the NAV drone portal to formally create your operation request. And using this portal is actually recommended even for flights in uncontrolled airspace because it centralizes all your planning, documentation, and potential communication with NAV Canada.
So how does that work? You log in and...
You'd log in, start a new operation request. You'd drop a pin precisely at the Jericho Sailing Center dock. You'd confirm it's within the Class C control zone surrounding Vancouver Harbor. And importantly, you, the pilot, need to know it's Class C from other charts like the VNC, even if NAV drone doesn't explicitly state the letter class in that screen.
Okay, pin dropped, airspace class confirmed.
Yeah.
Then you define the flight area.
Yes. You'd then draw a precise polygon on the map outlining your intended operational area, maybe extending 1 kilometer out from the dock and 3 kilometers east along the coastline, for example. You set your operational parameters. Maximum altitude maybe 200 feet, leaving a buffer below controlled airspace limits. Duration, maybe 90 minutes to cover your 1-hour shoot plus setup and buffer. You select your specific drone model, the Mavic 3, confirming its weight, and that you have the required safety assurance declaration for advanced ops on file.
And the portal helps with other pre-flight info too, right? Like weather.
It does. The beauty of the portal is that it then provides you with current weather forecasts for your specific location and planned time, including that KP index for potential GPS interference, which is incredibly helpful, especially in complex urban or waterfront environments.
Does it give any warnings?
Oh, yes. It lists important standard disclaimers you must acknowledge. Things like no flights carrying an emergency locator transmitter, ELT, no operations with ice or frost on the aircraft, reminding you of the pilot's ultimate responsibility for see and avoid with other aircraft, and the critical need for immediate contact with NAV Canada if your drone is lost or accidentally enters restricted airspace.
And then you submit the request.
Before submitting, you'll answer a few specific operational questions. Things like time required to terminate flight, which for a return to home from your maximum planned distance might be, say, 2 to 3 minutes for the Mavic 3. You also need to specify the pre-programmed behavior if control link is lost.
And that depends on where you launch from.
It can, yes. For a takeoff from solid land like the dock, return to home, RTH, is usually the best setting. But if you were hypothetically launching from the moving sailboat itself, which introduces other complexities, you might actually choose to have the drone hover if the control link is lost, especially if the boat is moving or the landing area is very small and precise, rather than having it try to fly back to a moving point.
Interesting distinction. So you submit all that.
You submit the application. It then goes into the queue for manual approval by a NAV Canada specialist, since it's over the water in that restricted area. NAV Canada will then notify you via email or the portal of the approval or denial, sometimes providing specific reasons for denial, which might allow you to adjust your plan and reapply.
Assuming it gets approved, what do you get back?
Once your operation is validated and approved, NAV Drone generates a comprehensive flight report. This isn't just a simple confirmation slip. It serves as your official documented site survey and authorization record. It includes all your flight details, your precise operational boundaries on a map, the approved altitudes and times, and, critically important, the direct phone numbers for the relevant air traffic control unit or emergency services. It's a really vital piece of documentation to have with you.
It sounds like a very thorough process just for the airspace part, but as we've established, a site survey is just one piece of this urban puzzle. What about making sure the actual ground, the dock in this case, where you launch and land, is truly suitable?
And this is where CR 901.33 takes center stage. That's the regulation mandating that you ensure no likelihood of collision at your launch and recovery site. And this, as we've hinted, goes far, far beyond simply finding a flat, empty space.
So what does suitable really mean in Transport Canada's interpretation?
Transport Canada interprets suitable to include various critical factors that are, frankly, often overlooked until something goes wrong. Think about hazards not just on the pad, but in the immediate climb-out and approach corridors.
What's directly above and around the pad?
Exactly. During ascent and descent, the most vulnerable phases of flight are their low-hanging tree branches, power lines, building overhangs, dock railings, flags or antennas. It's that immediate three-dimensional space around the launch landing point.
And the surface condition itself matters immensely, doesn't it?
Hugely. Is the surface wet and slippery? Is it icy, like in winter ops? Is it covered in loose gravel or debris that could get kicked up by the prop wash and potentially damage propellers or sensors? For instance, we mentioned that winter operation scenario on an icy downtown sidewalk earlier.
Right, where just launching from the ground might be risky.
Precisely. In that case, a suitable site might actually involve bringing your own launch pad. Maybe a piece of plywood fitted with an anti-slip mat to create a truly stable and safe surface. The ground slope, even a subtle one, can also affect takeoff stability and your options for an aborted landing, especially with heavier drones.
And then there are those invisible forces.
Yeah.
Turbulence and wind shear.
Yes, the unseen but very real potential for turbulence or wind shear. Between tall buildings, as we discussed, wind can funnel and swirl unpredictably. It can act like that cat with a laser pointer, batting your drone around in unexpected directions, especially near ground level.
And your own drone can cause issues.
It can. Your own prop wash can actually recirculate when launching very close to vertical walls or on contained rooftops. This can cause the drone to momentarily dip or drift sideways, especially during the last few critical feet of a precision landing when you need maximum stability.
And this brings us back to a massively crucial element for urban ops: crowd control.
Absolutely critical. The AIM strongly recommends securing the site. And it suggests doing this with physical barriers, think cones, brightly colored hazard tape, clear signage warning people of the drone operation, or, alternatively, having dedicated crew members whose specific job is performing active crowd control, keeping bystanders clear.
Now, you mentioned the AIM uses the word should, which usually means a recommendation, not a legal requirement like shall. So how enforceable is this?
That's a key point. While the language in the AIM is technically should, this recommendation is indirectly enforceable through CRR 901.33. If an incident occurs, say a bystander walks into your landing zone and gets hit by the drone, and it turns out you hadn't adequately controlled access to your site, Transport Canada can, and likely will, argue that your site wasn't truly suitable under 901.33 because you didn't mitigate the foreseeable risk of people entering the area.
So the practical takeaway for urban operations:
treat this should as a shall. Always assume you need to actively secure your launch and landing zone in an urban setting. Don't rely on people just noticing the drone or staying away on their own.
It's really about proactive control, isn't it? Mitigating risk before it happens. I like your analogy of thinking of your launch zone like selecting a safe loading bay for a big delivery truck.
Yeah, it works well. You don't just pull into any open spot, right? You need it clear, you need it controlled, you need a planned way in and a planned way out. You need to think about blind spots, potential foot traffic suddenly appearing.
Or maybe think of it like a stage manager setting up for a performance.
That works too. You control the audience through crowd management. You meticulously set the scene by marking the pad and clearing obstacles, and you hit your cue for launch or landing smoothly without any unexpected surprises from the environment or the public. This proactive, hands-on control is just vital for mitigating the unique risks of a dynamic urban environment.
Okay, so we've covered the site survey and ensuring the pad itself is suitable. Now let's broaden the lens a bit and talk about mitigating the other urban hazards that extend beyond your immediate launch pad. These seem to fall into three main categories: people, airspace, and the environment itself.
That's a good breakdown. Let's start with managing people because, as we've said, this is perhaps the most critical and often the least predictable factor in urban operations. CRR 901.26 explicitly defines minimum distances from people, and these are absolutely non-negotiable baselines.
Right, the 30-meter rule for basic ops.
Exactly. For basic operations where you generally have lower pilot qualifications and your drone might have fewer built-in safety features, you must maintain at least 30 meters. That's about 100 feet horizontally from any other person not directly involved in your operation. So bystanders, the general public, they need to be kept at least that far away at all times.
Okay. But what about advanced operations? That's where you can fly closer, right?
Yes. For advanced operations, where you've demonstrated a higher level of competency through exams and flight reviews, and your aircraft meets specific safety standards, you may be permitted to fly near or over people. But there's a critical nuance here.
What's the catch?
You can only do this if both your specific operation and your specific aircraft meet the requirements laid out in Standard 922, which details the safety assurance levels needed for operations near or over people. This involves things like manufacturer declarations about the drone's reliability and failure modes or specific operational procedures you have in place. It is not a carte blanche permission for advanced pilots to just fly directly over crowds whenever they feel like it.
So it requires specific drone capabilities and operational planning, not just the pilot's license.
Precisely. It means your drone likely has a higher level of redundancy built in, or your operational plan includes specific additional mitigation strategies documented and approved to protect the people below you. Or, alternatively, you might have a specific SFOC that grants permission for flight over people under defined conditions.
And that's where having extra eyes becomes so important. Visual observers, or VOs, covered under CRR 901.20, they act as your second crucial set of eyes on the sky, right?
Absolutely invaluable, especially in complex, potentially busy controlled airspace, or even just with visually noisy backdrops like a dense cityscape where it can be hard to track the drone against buildings or track potential hazards. A visual observer's primary purpose is singular. Maintain continuous, unaided visual contact with the drone and continuously scan the surrounding airspace for any potential hazards, other aircraft, manned or unmanned, birds, unexpected obstacles like a rising crane boom, while you, the pilot, can focus more intently on controlling the aircraft, monitoring your systems, and getting the specific shot or data you need.
They're essentially your dedicated safety net.
That's a perfect description. They're your essential safety net for situational awareness.
And the requirements for using a VO are pretty stringent, aren't they? It's not just having a buddy stand nearby.
No, not at all. If you use a VO, you, the pilot, must maintain reliable and timely communication with them throughout the entire flight. This usually means using two-way radios or perhaps a very robust cellular connection like a WhatsApp call, though radios are generally preferred for reliability.
And crucially, their view.
They must have an absolutely unobstructed continuous line of sight, LOS, the RPAS, at all times. Intermittent LOS, where the drone disappears behind a building corner, ducks below a rooftop parapet, or goes behind dense trees, is simply non-compliant. If the VO can't see the drone, they can't fulfill their function.
And here's a big one that catches people out, often mentioned in exams.
Ah, yes. The VO cannot perform their duties from a moving vehicle, full stop. So if you're filming a car commercial or following a marathon, your VO cannot be sitting in the chase car or on a bicycle alongside. They must be stationary.
Okay. Can one VO watch multiple drones?
Generally, no. They also cannot observe multiple aircraft simultaneously unless very specific stringent conditions are met, usually requiring an SFOC. And thinking back to our Vancouver sailing scenario.
Right. Launching from the dock to film the boat.
Since you, the pilot, would likely be staying on the dock for a stable control position, and the boat is moving further away, potentially beyond your direct visual range while still needing close shots, a VO positioned maybe further down the pier or on the shore, closer to where the boat will be sailing, but still maintaining that clear, unobstructed view back to the drone would almost certainly be mandatory for that operation to remain compliant.
And just having a VO isn't enough. You need to brief them properly too, right?
Oh, absolutely essential. A proper VO briefing is just as important as the pre-flight check you do on your drone itself. They need to confirm they can indeed continuously see the drone against the background. And crucially, they need to be briefed on what to look for regarding manned aircraft and how to communicate effectively.
Like what specifically?
Simple, but effective rules of thumb. Things like, do the tires of that approaching float plane look about the same size as your drone from your perspective? If yes, that means it's roughly at the same altitude, and that's a very bad thing. You need to communicate that conflict immediately. They have to understand the urgency, giving you, the pilot, enough precious seconds to react and take evasive action, especially if your drone is, say, 500 meters out over the water and needs maybe 2 or 3 minutes to execute a safe return to home. And this discussion about managing people and observers leads us directly back to the practicalities of securing the launch pad itself. As we've said, this goes far beyond just being polite. It's absolutely paramount for managing those unpredictable crowds in an urban environment.
So the cones, the tape, the signs.
Yes. Physical barriers like cones, brightly colored hazard tape, maybe A-frame signs clearly stating drone operation in progress, stay clear. Or having dedicated crew members performing active crowd control. These are all explicitly recommended by the TCAIM guidance. And real-world incidents, some slightly amusing, some potentially serious, really underscore why this is so critical.
Like the hot dog cart incident you mentioned.
Exactly. Back in 2016 in the U.S., a drone apparently tipped sideways on launch. Not due to a mechanical failure, but because its powerful downward prop wash bounced unexpectedly off a nearby food cart umbrella, creating localized turbulence that upset the aircraft. Thankfully, no injuries, but it's the classic example of an obstacle clearance failure caused by an unmanaged, cluttered launch environment.
Huh. And you also mentioned the birds as pad invaders incident.
Oh, yes, the Melbourne pigeon, a very stubborn pigeon, famously just waddled directly into a clearly marked drone landing zone mid-descent and simply refused to move. The operator had no choice but to keep the drone hovering safely above it for 3 agonizing minutes until the bird finally decided to vacate the area. Imagine the stress.
That's hilarious, but also highlights a real hazard.
It really does. These anecdotes, while maybe sounding minor, powerfully highlight why proactive crowd management and obstacle management, including unpredictable animals, isn't just a courteous gesture. It's a fundamental aspect of critical risk mitigation in the real world.
It's fascinating, too, to consider that technically Canada's smallest legally possible urban launch pad could be tiny, couldn't it?
Theoretically, yes. It could be as small as maybe a 1 meter by 1 meter rooftop space, provided that tiny space is perfectly stable, completely clear of immediate hazards, and meets all the other suitability checks under SIRE 9001.33. But launching or landing in such a confined area leaves almost zero margin for pilot error, GPS drift, or unexpected wind gusts. It's high risk.
So the analogy you used earlier still holds. Launching in urban areas is like parking that semi-truck in a crowded mall parking lot.
Exactly. You don't just pick any open spot that looks big enough. You have to actively think about your entry and exit routes, your blind spots, potential cross-traffic or cross-pedestrians, and who might suddenly walk behind you without looking. That proactive control of your immediate operating environment is absolutely essential.
Okay, moving beyond people and the immediate pad, let's talk about the complexity of urban airspace itself. This is where it gets truly layered and honestly a bit intimidating sometimes.
It can be. Urban environments are often overlaid with multiple, sometimes overlapping layers of complex airspace that might not be immediately obvious just looking at a basic consumer drone app. You might be operating directly under a Class C control zone, which are the highly regulated areas surrounding major airports like Vancouver Harbor or Toronto Pearson.
Right, requiring mandatory two-way communication and clearance for manned aircraft.
Precisely. Or you might be in Class D or E airspace, which are still controlled but generally less restrictive, often found near smaller regional airports or busy downtown heliports. And then you have the wild card. Temporary Class F restricted zones. These can pop up relatively unexpectedly for things like major public events, government operations, military exercises, or VIP movements.
And these layers aren't always clear on just one map.
That's the critical point. Because of this complexity, you absolutely must cross-reference information from multiple official sources. Relying solely on one app, even a good one like NAV drone, or just one type of map, is genuinely a recipe for potential disaster, like accidentally busting controlled airspace or flying into a temporary restriction.
So what are the essential sources pilots must check?
You need NAV drone, primarily for checking active restrictions, airspace advisories, and crucially for submitting your authorization requests if you plan to fly in controlled airspace. But that's not enough. You also need the Designated Airspace Handbook, the DAH.
What's in the DAH?
The DAH provides the definitive, permanent information on airspace designations and classifications across Canada, including the precise boundaries and altitudes of control zones, terminal control areas, and advisory areas. It's the official legal definition of the airspace structure.
Okay, NAV drone for current status, DH for permanent structure. What else?
You need the Canada Flight Supplement, the CFS. This provides incredibly detailed information about specific aerodromes, airports, heliports, waterdromes, things like runway layouts, lighting systems, specific operating procedures for manned aircraft at that location, and crucial communication frequencies. Understanding the local traffic patterns described in the CFS is vital, even if you're just flying nearby.
And the last piece? NOTAMs.
Absolutely critical. NOTAMs notices to airmen. These provide timely information on temporary changes or hazards affecting the airspace or ground facilities. This could be anything from a closed runway to construction crane activity near an airport to those temporary Class F flight restrictions we mentioned. NOTAMs can often appear with very short notice, so checking them right before your flight is essential.
It sounds like a lot to juggle. And what about actually talking to air traffic control?
Communication with ATC is paramount if you're operating under an authorization in controlled airspace. While the general number 1866WX brief connects you to the Flight Information Center, FIC, which is great for general weather briefings and filing flight plans, if you're actively operating in controlled airspace and have an authorization, you must have the direct phone number for the specific control tower or unit responsible for that airspace.
Where do you find that number?
It's often provided directly on your NAV drone flight report or authorization confirmation. Calling the general FIC number in an urgent situation where you need to speak to the controller handling your airspace will just burn precious time while they try to figure out who to transfer you to. Having that direct line is critical for immediate communication if needed.
And even with authorization, there's a golden rule, isn't there?
The fundamental principle in aviation, one you must absolutely internalize. Manned aircraft always have priority, full stop. Even if you have a valid ATC authorization to be in that airspace, you must be prepared to see, avoid, and yield instantly to any manned aircraft. Your authorization does not grant you right of way over them. You need an immediate abort plan ready to execute without hesitation.
Okay, that covers people and airspace. Now, the third category, environmental factors and those tricky urban microclimates. This seems like where the physics of the city really impacts the drone.
It absolutely does. Urban environments significantly distort general weather forecasts and create unique microclimates that can profoundly impact drone flight in ways you might not anticipate just by looking at a standard weather app. We've touched on wind canyons.
Right, wind funneling between buildings.
Exactly. Wind hitting a tall building has nowhere to go but down, around, and through the gaps. This can create incredibly unpredictable gusts, sustained flows, and swirling turbulence at street level or partway up the building face, acting exactly like that cat with a laser pointer, batting your drone around unexpectedly.
And we mentioned the drone's own prop wash causing issues near walls.
Yes, your own drone's powerful downward prop wash can recirculate when launching or landing very close to vertical walls, under overhangs, or inside confined courtyard spaces. This recirculation can momentarily reduce lift or cause the drone to dip or drift sideways during those critical low-altitude phases of flight, just when you need maximum stability for a safe landing.
Then there's the invisible issue of GNSS multipath. Can you explain that a bit more simply? How does it actually confuse the drone?
Think of it like trying to pinpoint someone's location using sound in a room full of hard, reflective surfaces and echo chamber. Your drone's GPS receiver is constantly listening for timing signals from multiple satellites orbiting overhead. To calculate its position accurately, it needs to receive those signals directly.
Okay.
But in a city, those satellite signals can bounce off reflective surfaces like glass skyscrapers, steel bridges, or even large metal signs before reaching your drone's antenna. Instead of receiving one clear, direct signal from each satellite, the receiver might get the direct signal plus one or more slightly delayed echoes of the same signal that took a longer, reflected path.
So it gets multiple versions of the same signal.
Exactly. And the drone's internal software gets confused trying to reconcile these multiple conflicting timing signals. It leads to errors in its calculated position. This isn't just a minor glitch. It can cause the drone's perceived home point, where it thinks it took off from, to suddenly jump several meters away unexpectedly.
Which could be disastrous for return to home.
Potentially, yes. Or even worse, it could cause the return-to-home function, if activated, to calculate a path that guides it directly into the side of a building, because its understanding of its own position relative to nearby obstacles is flawed. We've seen logged cases where a drone's autopilot genuinely thought it was located inside a nearby building due to severe multipath interference, causing it to try and navigate through a solid wall.
That's genuinely terrifying. And related to positioning, there's magnetic interference, too.
Yes, another invisible urban gremlin. Reinforced concrete structures, common parking decks, bridge foundations, and even some sidewalks in high-rise zones often contain a dense grid of steel reinforcement bars, or rebar, just below the surface. This rebar can create localized magnetic fields that severely mess with your drone's sensitive compass.
What does that look like to the pilot?
It can manifest as persistent compass calibration warnings during startup, making it difficult to even get the drone ready for flight. Or, more dangerously, it can cause erratic flight behavior or toilet bowling effects mid-flight if the compass gets confused about the drone's heading.
Wow. Okay, so we have wind, GPS echoes, magnetic fields. What about heat?
Thermal effects are significant too. Heat radiating upwards from vast, dark asphalt surfaces like parking lots or roadways, especially on a hot, sunny day, creates rising columns of air called thermal updrafts. We saw this in a test flight example in Phoenix, where intense thermal updrafts actually caused the drone's downward-facing obstacle avoidance sensors to see the shimmering hot air as if it were a solid wall, triggering avoidance maneuvers.
Seriously, it saw heat as an obstacle.
Effectively, yes.
Yeah.
And similarly, plumes of hot air rising from rooftop HVAC exhaust vents, a very common challenge encountered in scenarios like that Toronto rooftop survey, can significantly destabilize a drone, particularly during a slow, precision final approach for landing, causing it to unexpectedly gain or lose altitude.
And then there's cold weather. Canada knows cold weather. How does that impact things?
While CARS Part 9X doesn't have specific regulations labeled ISOPs for drones like manned aviation does, Transport Canada absolutely expects pilots to mitigate cold weather hazards under the general suitable site requirement of 901.33. This means dealing with icy or snow-covered launch surfaces appropriately.
Like using that anti-slip mat we talked about.
Exactly. Beyond the surface, cold weather itself significantly reduces battery performance. Flight times can be drastically shorter. It can also slow down satellite acquisition for getting a solid GPS lock before takeoff. So careful battery pre-warming strategies and planning for shorter flight profiles become essential in winter conditions.
And one last environmental factor, dynamic water levels near rivers or waterfronts.
Yes, this is relevant for operations near urban rivers that might be dam-controlled or tidal waterfronts. Rapidly changing water levels due to dam releases or tidal shifts can create evolving hazards, potentially flooding your planned launch zone or changing shoreline obstacles during your operation. This requires continuous assessment of your site suitability, not just a single check before you start.
So, given all these invisible and sometimes dynamic forces, wind, GPS, magnetic, thermal, cold, water, how do you possibly mitigate all of them?
It sounds daunting, but there are practical steps. The most important one, always perform a low hover sanity check right after takeoff before committing to flying your full mission profile.
What does that involve?
Just take off, hover maybe 5-10 feet off the ground for 30 seconds or so. Watch your drone's behavior closely. Is it holding position steadily? Are you getting any compass error warnings on your controller? Does the GPS lock seem stable? Assess any initial wind effects. Is it drifting significantly, even in a hover? This simple check can reveal potential issues before you fly out over obstacles or people.
And if you do encounter issues like GPS instability mid-flight,
be prepared, mentally and technically, to switch to a manual flight mode, like ATTI mode on DJI drones, which relies less on GPS, instantly if significant GNSS issues arise. You need to be proficient in flying the drone without GPS assistance, especially in challenging environments.
And the return-to-home altitude setting.
Absolutely critical. Set your return-to-home, RTH altitude, high enough to safely clear any potential obstacles in the entire operating area, including the tallest buildings, cranes, or terrain between your drone's furthest point and its home point. Never, ever rely on the default RTH altitude setting out of the box, especially in an urban environment with tall structures. Always customize it based on your site survey.
These aren't just theoretical concerns, are they? These issues pop up in the real world all the time.
All the time. And learning from the experiences of other pilots and the unexpected challenges they faced is invaluable. We've taken some of the most illustrative real-world scenarios drawn from incident reports and case studies to give you a concrete picture of what can actually go wrong out there, and more importantly, what the key learnings were.
Okay, let's dive into some scenarios. Let's start with that downtown rooftop survey in Toronto we mentioned. Picture it. You're hired to inspect the facade of an 18-story office tower. You know you're operating in busy, classy airspace. There's a major hospital heliport nearby, adding air traffic complexity. And the rooftop itself is cluttered with large HVAC units. What immediately jumps out as the key challenges and hazards?
Well, the obvious physical hazards right on the rooftop are, firstly, the rooftop edge itself, a significant fall risk for the crew setting up. Then those large HVAC vents are not just physical obstacles, but also potential sources of that unpredictable turbulence and hot air plumes we discussed. There's likely an antenna array somewhere on the roof, too, posing a potential RF interference risk to your drone's control signal or video downlink.
And being downtown,
you always need to look around for adjacent construction sites with active cranes. Cranes are dynamic, moving hazards that require careful coordination. But perhaps the most critical learning from this specific scenario was the wind difference. The pilot reported that the wind was almost perfectly calmed down at street level when they arrived. But when they got the drone up to the 18-story rooftop height, it was encountering a sustained 25-knot crosswind. They launched, thinking conditions were calm based on the ground reading, and almost lost control immediately due to that unexpected powerful wind shear at altitude.
Wow. That's a stark reminder that street-level conditions are definitely not always indicative of conditions just a couple hundred feet higher up in a city. What else did that Toronto rooftop experience teach us?
It strongly reinforced that those HVAC exhaust plumes can significantly destabilize a drone during a slow, precision landing attempt, making it really difficult to hold a steady position in the final feet. And it highlighted the issue of compass calibration on steel-reinforced concrete roofs, which are very common in large office buildings. The rebar often causes calibration errors or failures.
So what's the best practice there?
The best practice, if feasible, is to perform your compass calibration down at street level, away from the building's influence, before taking the drone up to the roof. Or find a known clear spot on the roof itself, away from major structural beams or HVAC units. The emotional factor here, the trap, is that false sense of security a calm street-level wind can create. It's a mistake many new urban pilots make.
Okay, let's shift gears. Scenario 2. A park launch during a weekend festival in Ottawa. Imagine a large urban park, maybe typically Class E airspace, which is less restrictive than downtown Class C. But the key operational detail is that it's during the city's annual food and music festival, a well-publicized, formally advertised event. How did that single detail change the entire operational picture?
This is where that recent SOR 2025-70 amendment we discussed earlier really comes into play, fundamentally changing the requirements. Because it was a formally advertised event, an SFOC, a Special Flight Operations Certificate, was suddenly required for this operation, even if the pilot was only using a drone under 2 kilograms, which would normally just fall under standard advanced operations rules.
So the event itself triggered the need for an SFOC, regardless of the drone size or usual airspace class.
Exactly. That was a significant regulatory hurdle that the pilot had to clear, involving a formal application and approval process that takes time. Beyond just the airspace paperwork, the practicalities on-site were huge. Park security coordination became vital, and deploying clear safety signage and barriers was absolutely essential for managing the large, curious crowds typical of a festival. The real challenge for the pilot was navigating both the complex regulatory labyrinth of getting that SFOC approved and managing the very real practical challenges of keeping an excited, potentially unaware public safely away from the drone operating area.
So even if the drone itself was small and the airspace usually less restricted, the context of the advertised event made it incredibly complex. What were the key takeaways or learnings from that festival scenario?
Firstly, it drove home that event operations, especially large public ones, require far more planning than just checking airspace. An SSOC can be absolutely critical now, even for smaller drones, and obtaining one takes significant lead time. Secondly, crowd curiosity is extremely high at festivals. People are naturally drawn to drones. This makes diligent signage, perhaps using physical barriers like tape or fencing, and having crew actively managing the perimeter essential, not optional.
And dealing with client pressure.
That was a big one here too. The pilot reported significant client pressure to fly closer to the main stage or over certain crowded areas to get better shots. They absolutely had to stand their ground, politely but firmly, explaining the regulatory clearance distances and the SFOC limitations. Remember, client requests or production demands do not override safety regulations. That can be a tough conversation to have on site, under pressure, but it's non-negotiable. The stress comes from balancing those client expectations with immutable safety rules.
Okay, let's move from a wide-open park to something much, much tighter. Alleyway facade mapping in Calgary. Picture a narrow downtown alleyway. Often these might be technically in uncontrolled airspace, Class G, but they're usually very close to busy downtown heliports, meaning lots of low-flying helicopter traffic nearby. What unique hazards does a confined alley present?
Oh, tight urban spaces like alleys are a whole different beast. The obvious hazards are physical, protruding fire escapes, low-hanging streetlights or wires, dumpsters, and the constant potential for delivery trucks or other vehicles suddenly entering the alley. But the less obvious hazards, the ones that caught the pilot in this scenario, were more insidious.
Like what?
Like significant compass drift caused by rebar embedded in the pavement and the foundations of the adjacent buildings. It's very common in dense urban infrastructure. And then those unpredictable wind funneling effects we talked about. Wind hitting the tall buildings on either side gets squeezed into the alley, creating unexpected swirling turbulence that can sometimes be even worse and more unpredictable than the wind on an open rooftop.
And GPS issues, too.
Yes. The pilot here experienced significant GNSS multipath interference because the satellite signals were bouncing crazily off the tall, sheer building faces on both sides. This interference actually became so severe that it forced them to switch the drone into manual flight mode, ATTI, because the GPS position lock was unreliable, flying fully manually in a tight, obstacle-rich alleyway. That's a high-stress, high-skill situation.
So it's definitely not just about what you can physically see in the alley. What did this teach us?
It powerfully demonstrated that severe multipath interference can genuinely force a switch to manual control, even on sophisticated drones that are typically considered GPS reliable. You need to be prepared for that possibility. It also showed that wind gusts in narrow alleys are extremely unpredictable and can change direction and intensity very rapidly. And importantly, this mission highlighted the immense value of meticulously mapping these subtle urban hazards, noting down the specific areas where you experience magnetic interference or where the wind tunnel effect was worst for future missions in the same area. Building that local knowledge base is crucial.
Okay, let's head back to the coast. An Irby waterfront launch in Vancouver, near the busy Cole Harbor area. We know it's Class C airspace and notorious for heavy float plane activity. What are the specific hazards unique to launching right near the water's edge there?
Well, you've got the potential for water spray affecting your drone, especially on windy days or near boat wakes. You need to be mindful of potential mast tops or rigging from docked boats if you're doing low passes near marinas. But the most critical high-consequence hazard is the incredibly unpredictable nature of seaplane departures and arrivals.
How so? They don't use fixed runways, right?
Exactly. Seaplanes don't always follow a strict, predictable flight path like aircraft at an airport. They can take off and land from various directions on the water, depending on wind and water conditions, often climbing out or descending at relatively low altitudes, right over the areas where you might be operating your drone. The key gotcha here, the thing Transport Canada absolutely expects you to understand and prioritize, is that manned aircraft always have priority. Always. Even if you have ATC authorization to be there, you must yield instantly.
And this pilot had a close call.
Yes, the report mentioned a near-miss situation where a seaplane appeared seemingly out of nowhere on its takeoff run, requiring immediate evasive action by the drone pilot.
That's incredibly high stakes. What's the essential mitigation strategy for that kind of environment?
Having a pre-planned and mentally rehearsed immediate abort maneuver is vital. You need to know exactly what you will do without hesitation if a manned aircraft suddenly appears in your vicinity. Will you execute a rapid climb straight up? Will you perform a quick descent to a safe low altitude? Will you make an immediate lateral retreat away from its path? This needs to be decided before you fly, based on your operating location and the likely traffic patterns. The inherent stress of operating over water, combined with dynamic, unpredictable air traffic like seaplanes, demands an exceptionally high level of situational awareness and preparedness.
Okay, now for a scenario that sounds straightforward for media work, but trips up many people on the regulatory side. A moving vehicle media shoot in Montreal. Let's say the client wants dynamic shots following a cycling event, filmed from a drone operated from a follow car driving alongside the cyclists. What's the immediate glaring red flag here from a regulatory standpoint?
The absolute non-negotiable red flag is CRR 901.20, which, as we discussed, explicitly states that a visual observer cannot perform their duties from a moving vehicle. And since complex shots like following cyclists often rely heavily on a VO for maintaining situational awareness while the pilot focuses on framing, this rule effectively means you cannot legally launch or operate your drone from a moving vehicle if you are also relying on a VO in that same vehicle.
So that whole concept is basically a non-starter.
As described, yes.
Yeah.
The very common exam gotcha question, because it seems like such a convenient and logical way to get those kinds of shots for media or film. The pilot in this particular case reported being initially pushed quite hard by the production client to do exactly that, operate from the moving car.
So how do you achieve the client's goal, getting those dynamic follow shots while staying compliant with the regulations?
It requires a completely different operational workflow. You need to launch the drone from a compliant, static, non-moving point along the cyclist's route. Then you retrieve the drone at other pre-planned static stops further down the route. If the cycling event covers a significant distance, you would likely need multiple visual observers positioned strategically along the route to ensure that continuous, unbroken line of sight is maintained with the drone as it passes from one VO's observation zone to the next, with seamless communication handoffs.
That sounds way more complicated and resource-intensive.
It absolutely is. It significantly increases the complexity, the planning required, and the manpower needed for the operation. The key learning here is that a seemingly simple regulatory restriction like no VO from a moving vehicle often necessitates a fundamental rethink of the entire operational plan. And managing client expectations around these logistical requirements and the associated costs can be a significant challenge for the drone operator.
Let's look at another structural scenario, an urban construction site in Calgary. Picture a mixed-use tower going up. What are the hazards specific to operating a drone right inside or immediately adjacent to an active, large-scale construction site?
The construction sites are hazard hotspots. You've got the obvious dynamic hazard of tower cranes potentially swinging heavy loads through your intended airspace. You have the dense steel frame of the building itself, which can cause significant RF reflections, interfering with your control signal or video downlink. You might have welding operations happening, which can potentially generate electromagnetic interference. And of course, lots of ground vehicle movement and personnel.
So how do you manage those, especially the cranes?
Coordination is key. The pilot in this scenario had to meticulously coordinate their flight times to coincide with periods when the tower cranes were scheduled to be idle or parked. Trying to fly around actively swinging cranes is just far too risky. And the RF interference from the steel structure was a real issue, causing intermittent video link loss. This highlights that losing your video feed can be almost as dangerous as losing GPS signal in complex urban operations, as it severely degrades your situational awareness.
Okay, one more complex scenario. A high-profile urban event near Parliament Hill in Ottawa involving a VIP visit which triggers a temporary airspace restriction.
The dreaded temporary flight restriction, or TFR. These often come in the form of a temporary Class F restricted airspace, designated by NOTAM. The key gotcha here is the timing. What happens if one of these TFRs goes active while you are already mid-flight, operating legally under a previous authorization?
What does happen? Can you finish your shot?
Absolutely not. There are no, let me just finish this last shot, exceptions when it comes to airspace restrictions, especially TFRs involving security or VIP movements. If a TFR covering your operating area goes active, you must comply immediately. This usually means landing the drone as quickly and safely as possible or exiting the restricted airspace by the most direct route if that's feasible and safe. Documenting your immediate compliance, noting the time you were notified or became aware, and the time you landed or exited is also crucial.
Okay, these scenarios are incredibly illustrative. They really paint a picture of the complex ballet involved in safe and compliant urban drone operations. It's clearly not just about knowing the rules, but about applying them in dynamic, often challenging situations.
Exactly. And that's why, to be truly beyond exam ready, to be confidently safe and compliant out there in the real urban environment, you really need a sort of master checklist in your head. We've boiled it down to 10 keys to compliance that you should be able to confidently tick off mentally every single time you plan and execute an urban drone flight.
Okay, let's run through them. What's number one?
Number one, know your cars. Don't just vaguely remember them, really know them. Memorize the key sections impacting urban ops. TIAR 901.23 regarding having proper procedures, 901.24 on checking all pre-flight information, 901.26 defining those crucial distances from persons, 901.27 mandating the site survey, and 901.33 demanding a suitable site. These regulations are your absolute legal backbone. They're the rules that govern your flight, and ignorance is simply never an excuse.
Number two,
document your site survey. Don't just do a quick mental check. Perform a thorough survey and meticulously document it. Record all identified hazards, map out your planned approach and departure paths, assess and note the surface stability of your launch pad, and document the environmental conditions. Wind, visibility, KP index. This documentation is your tangible proof of due diligence if anything is ever questioned.
Number three,
monitor continuously. Remember, the site survey is not a one-and-done checkbox activity you do an hour before the flight. Transport Canada inspectors expect and safety demands continuous monitoring for changes during the operation. A new construction crane might start moving. An unexpected crowd might gather. The weather might shift suddenly. You must remain vigilant and be ready to adapt your plan or even abort the flight if conditions change significantly.
Number 4.
Secure the pad. Always, without exception, physically secure your launch and landing pad during urban operations. Use cones, use high visibility tape, use clear signage, or use dedicated crew members for crowd control. Do it even if you think it's overkill or that no one will possibly come close. Treat it as a shall, because it's a fundamental part of maintaining a suitable site under 901.33 and protecting bystanders.
Number 5, relating to VOs.
Understand VO limitations. If you are using a visual observer, ensure their line of sight to the drone is never, ever blocked, even momentarily. And constantly reiterate and confirm that they are never to attempt performing their duties from a moving vehicle. This is a common point of non-compliance that carries significant operational and legal risk.
Number 6, airspace checks.
Triple check airspace. Don't rely on just one source for airspace information. It's too risky. Cross-reference information from all 3 critical sources. An AV drone for the latest active restrictions and authorizations, the Designated Airspace Handbook, DAH, and Canada Flight Supplement, CFS, for the permanent airspace designations and aerodrome details, and always check the latest NOTAMs for any temporary changes or hazards.
Number 7, dealing with interference.
Mitigate interference. Actively expect and proactively plan to mitigate potential GNSS, GPS, and magnetic compass interference, especially when operating in urban canyons between tall buildings or near large metal structures. Always perform that low hover sanity check right after takeoff before committing to the full mission to confirm your drone's stability and the reliability of its positioning systems in that specific location. Number 8, permissions. Obtain written permission. Always obtain and carry with you, either physically or digitally, clear, written proof of permission from the landowner or relevant authority for using your chosen launch and landing site. Having this document readily available can instantly diffuse potential confrontations with curious security guards, police officers, or property managers, saving immense time and stress on site.
Number 9, testing the air.
Test microclimates. Don't just rely on the general forecast. Conduct a short, safe, vertical profile test flight. Carefully ascend straight up a bit to assess the unique urban wind effects and potential thermal updrafts at various altitudes within your planned operating height before starting your main mission flight. Remember, what feels calm at street level can be a turbulent beast 50, 100, or 200 feet up between buildings.
And finally, number 10.
Log everything. Meticulously log all pertinent operational details, flight times, locations, including precise launch coordinates, crew members, weather conditions encountered, battery usage, any incidents or irregularities noted, communications with ATC if applicable. Keep detailed records. These logs are invaluable for demonstrating regulatory compliance, supporting insurance claims if needed, and importantly, for learning from your experiences and improving your future operational planning and safety.
That's a fantastic, actionable checklist. 10 keys to really nail compliance and safety. So we've come a long way from those Wild West days, haven't we? But the evolution isn't stopping. What does the sky of tomorrow look like? Let's talk briefly about the likely future of urban drone operations, maybe looking out to 2025, 2030.
Yeah, the next 5 years, I think, will usher in some really significant advancements and integrations that will profoundly shape how urban drone operations are conducted, especially impacting those crucial launch and retrieve phases we focus on.
I imagine we'll see much deeper integration into what's called uncrewed traffic management, or UTM, systems. How will that specifically impact choosing and using a launch site?
Absolutely. I expect that launch and retrieve sites in dense urban areas will increasingly require some form of digital pre-clearance, likely submitted via NAV drone or perhaps new, more advanced UTM platforms as they roll out. This won't just be about requesting airspace permission. The specific location of your launch site might even need to be registered and potentially geofenced within central databases.
Why geofence the launch site?
To help deconflict operations between multiple drone operators, and potentially even with future manned eVTOLs or air taxis operating in the same low-altitude urban airspace. The goal is a highly coordinated, digitized airspace management system, ensuring the right aircraft is in the right place at the right time, minimizing collision risks, and maximizing overall system efficiency. Your launch spot becomes a node in that network.
And how do you see public safety and crowd risk management evolving within that more integrated framework?
It's highly probable, I think, that we'll see moves towards mandatory physical marking standards for launch pads, at least for certain categories of higher risk operations. We might see standardized designs for signage and hazard tape guidelines emerge, aimed at improving public awareness and predictability around drone operations. The aim will be to make drone operations much more visible, understandable, and therefore safer for everyone sharing the urban ground space, minimizing that wildcard factor of unpredictable human behavior near operating drones.
And as the skies get even busier.
Exactly. As the skies become potentially exponentially busier with maybe air taxis doing short hops, last-mile delivery drones buzzing around, and just more diverse unmanned aircraft systems, UAS traffic in general, the management of ground-based hazards like your launch site selection will likely become seamlessly integrated into broader airspace planning strategies. This could mean your choice of launch or retrieve site might become intrinsically tied to following specific approved low-altitude corridors or using designated urban landing zones within the city fabric, creating a sort of structured aerial highway system, even at low levels.
But I imagine the insurance industry and civil liability concerns will play a huge role in driving some of these changes, perhaps even faster than regulation.
Without a doubt. Insurance companies are already, right now, beginning to demand documented launch site hazard assessments as a condition for providing coverage for commercial urban drone jobs, even in situations where it might not be explicitly required by the letter of the current regulations. This financial pressure, the need for insurance, is a powerful incentive. It could drive widespread adoption of things like photo-documented pre-flight site surveys becoming just a standard business practice for all serious commercial operators, regardless of future rule changes.
So the master move for pilots listening right now.
The key takeaway, the master move for you, the pilot operating today, is to build the habits now of meticulously logging your exact launch zone coordinates, thoroughly documenting the environmental conditions you assessed, and keeping detailed records of all permissions obtained. These meticulous records will not only serve you well today for compliance and safety, but they will become increasingly required and absolutely invaluable as you navigate this rapidly evolving, more integrated, and more scrutinized urban airspace landscape of the near future. Get those good documentation habits ingrained now.
Okay, so after this deep dive, what truly sticks? What are the absolute key takeaways and maybe some common misconceptions we need to bust?
Well, to recap the core thread, the rules for safe urban launch and retrieve didn't just materialize overnight. They fundamentally evolved from those early essential SFOC safety conditions that Transport Canada imposed case by case. These then became codified into core CARS requirements, primarily CAR 901.27, demanding that comprehensive site survey, and CAR 901.33, requiring you ensure a suitable site, and these regulations are continuously reinforced and clarified by Transport Canada's AIM best practices and guidance material. It's an ongoing process.
And it's crucial to bust some common myths that still seem to circulate among pilots, even experienced ones sometimes. Myth number 1. If NAV drone looks clear on the map, I'm good to launch anywhere in that green zone.
Busted. Absolutely not. An AV drone is just one tool for airspace awareness. You still need to perform that thorough physical site survey on the ground. You still need to secure landowner permission for your launch spot. And you absolutely still need to actively, physically secure your launch and landing area from public access. NAV tools supplement your CARS duties. They do not replace them.
Okay. Myth number 2. My advanced certification means I can fly over people whenever I want in the city.
Busted. Definitely not true. You can only fly near or over people under advanced ops if your specific RPAS model and your specific operation meet the stringent safety assurance and declaration requirements for near-over people flights as laid out in Standard 922. Or, alternatively, if you have obtained a specific SFOC explicitly granting that permission under defined conditions, your advanced pilot certificate alone is not a blanket permission slip to fly over crowds.
Myth 3. Marking the pad with cones and tape is just optional safety theater. It doesn't really matter if the area is empty.
Busted. Absolutely, fundamentally not true. The TCAR explicitly recommends securing the site with barriers or crew. As we discussed, this should has effectively become a shall in terms of enforcement and demonstrating due diligence under 901.33. It's not just for show. It's fundamental, practical risk control that directly supports the suitability requirement of your site and protects potentially unaware bystanders.
Myth 4. Tall buildings actually help with getting a better GPS signal lock.
Busted. Quite the opposite, usually. Tall buildings, especially those with large glass or metal facades, are the primary cause of that GNSS multipath interference. The signal bounce, which leads to those GPS echoes and results in inaccurate, unreliable positioning for your drone. They obstruct signals and create reflections.
Myth 5. Urban means I can launch from pretty much anywhere that just looks empty at the moment.
Busted. That passive mindset creates significant unnecessary risk. You must always proactively control and clearly mark your chosen operating zone. You need to actively manage every element within that zone, not just hope it stays empty.
Myth 6. Site suitability under 901.33 is really just about the physical size of the launch pad.
Busted. It's much, much broader than just size. As we've covered, it encompasses the surface condition. Is it stable, level, free of debris, potential obstacles in the immediate climb out and approach paths, the ground slope, the potential for localized turbulence or wind shear, and crucially, your plan for effective crowd control.
Myth 7. Doing a site survey is just a one-time check off a list before the flight.
Busted. Transport Canada inspectors and basic airmanship expect continuous monitoring and reassessment of site conditions during your operations. The urban environment is dynamic. Hazards can appear or change unexpectedly. Your survey mindset needs to be ongoing throughout the flight.
Myth 8. My visual observer can watch the drone just fine from inside the moving car we're using for this shoot.
Busted. Never ever. CON 901.20 is crystal clear. The VO must not be in a moving vehicle while performing their duties. This is a hard non-compliance point.
Myth 9. As long as I check NAV drone, I've done my due diligence on airspace.
Busted. No. As we detailed, you must cross-reference information from NAV drone with the Designated Airspace Handbook, DAH, the Canada Flight Supplement, the CFS, and the latest NOTAMs to get a truly complete, accurate, and compliant picture of your operational airspace. Relying on only one source is insufficient.
And finally, myth 10. GNSS and compass interference in cities is just random bad luck and totally unavoidable.
Busted. Well, interference certainly happens. It's often quite predictable, especially near clusters of tall glass and steel buildings, over large reinforced concrete structures like parkades, or near active rooftop antenna farms. You can often anticipate where it's likely to be worse and proactively mitigate it with good site selection, that pre-flight hover check, and be ready to fly manually if needed. It's not always just random.
Okay, so busting those myths is crucial. It really comes down to diligence, planning, and understanding the nuances, which leads us to a final thought to leave our listeners with.
Yeah, a final provocative thought, perhaps. Considering this relentless march of drone technology, the increasing density we expect in our urban skies with all sorts of new types of aerial vehicles potentially sharing the space, and this strong regulatory push towards greater digital integration. How will individual drone pilots like you, listening now, need to adapt? How will you not just comply with the rules, but proactively adjust your mindset and skills for a future where real-time conditions reported by a UTM system might change your flight plan in an instant, and where every single launch might need to be digitally pre-cleared and tracked by a centralized system? What new responsibilities might that concept of active monitoring truly entail when your small drone is just one tiny data point, one pixel, in a vast, interconnected, and constantly evolving urban airspace network?
That's a powerful question to ponder. What an incredible deep dive we've taken today. We have navigated the truly complex and clearly ever-evolving regulatory landscape of urban drone operations. We traced it from those somewhat Wild West origins right up to the crucial modern requirements for meticulous site surveys and ensuring genuinely suitable launch pads. You, our listener, now hopefully have a much clearer understanding of the critical role of managing people, deciphering those invisible layers of urban airspace, and actively mitigating the unique environmental hazards that cities throw at drone operations, all brought to life through those real-world scenarios and hard-won lessons.
And this isn't just abstract theory. It's practical, essential, foundational knowledge for anyone engaging with drones in our cities. Whether you're a seasoned professional flying daily, an aspiring pilot studying for your exams, or even just someone curious about the technology shaping the airspace above your head. We sincerely hope this deep dive has not only thoroughly informed you, but has also maybe sparked a new level of curiosity and a deeper appreciation for the meticulous planning and unwavering diligence required for safe, compliant, and successful urban drone flight.
The urban sky truly is a fascinating frontier, isn't it? And being truly well-informed, understanding these complexities, is your ultimate shortcut to mastering it safely and successfully.
Remember, in this rapidly advancing field, knowledge isn't just power. It's genuinely the very foundation of safe and successful flight operations, every single time.
Thank you so much for joining us on this exploration today. That's a wrap on today's mission, Commander. See above, go beyond, get ahead. For more training, tools, and intel, head to skycommander.ca. If you learned something new, share it, subscribe, and leave us a 5-star debrief.